In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at some of the games that I had and played as a child. So I went through, I picked out from my collection around 15 games and or series that I've played as a child into my teens. I just kind of wanted to go over those with you guys today and kind of reminisce on, some of what I recall, growing up playing these games. I'm going to start off with actually a series. And this was for PlayStation 2 Dreamcast era. And it is the Tokyo Extreme Racer series. So growing up, I was a huge fan of Initial D. Played it all the time in the arcade. And also a huge fan of Tokyo Extreme Racer. And so this is probably my favorite racing franchise across any platform. And so I'm trying to collect all of them. But so far I have the original Tokyo Extreme Racer for the Dreamcast, Tokyo Extreme Racer Zero, and a game that I've actually never played is Tokyo Extreme Racer Drift 2, which is interesting because it actually appears to have the best graphics of any of the games. So at some point in the future, I definitely want to try that one out and see how it is. Like I said, huge Initial D fan. I love the Need for Speed series, but nothing compares to the high-speed racing in Tokyo Extreme Racer. It was, absolutely insane. Plays very similar to how like an Initial D used to play in the arcade. So, probably one of my favorite franchises, especially in the racing genre. Next up, we're going to jump over to Virtual Boy, and it is Mario Tennis. So I remember over summer break from school, I went to visit my relatives, right, and for a few weeks, and I had my choice of, what did I want to take with me? And what I chose was to take the Virtual Boy, and at the time, I only had one game for it, and that was Mario Tennis. And I played this game so much when I was there. A lot of fun memories from this game. Believe it or not, I never got headaches or anything from this game. But, I loved my Virtual Boy. I still have a Virtual Boy. This is one of my favorite games for the Virtual Boy. It's probably the most playable game on the Virtual Boy. It is a blast. But definitely some fun memories with that one. Next up, we'll jump over to Sega Genesis, and it's Vector Man. So, my local mall, my Sears had a kiosk with the Sega Genesis hooked up, and the demo cart that they had in that system was Vector Man. So, I'd go to the mall, my brother would be looking around, my father getting his hair cut, whatever. I would, go in Sears and play Vector Man so much. Every time I went to the mall, Vector Man, Vector Man, Vector Man. Love the game. It's a challenging game, but still nonetheless, so many great memories playing Vector Man. One of my favorites. I wasn't that big of a fan of Vector Man 2, but Vector Man is definitely one of my all-time favorite games. Next up, we're going to go ahead and jump over to N64 real quick. So, there's 4 major games for N64 that I recall playing growing up. Obviously all around the same time frame. But we're going to go ahead and start off with the obvious title, and that is Super Mario 64. Like some other kids, I got an N64 on Christmas. Amazing experience. Super Mario 64, Cruising the World, some other titles. But this game is amazing. I still play it to today. About a year ago, I started Game Fresh. Just so many memories playing this game. One of the more challenging games to play, which is amazing because when I restarted, a year ago, there were so many levels that, I knew what to do, but it was just like, how did I figure this out as a kid? Like, without the strategy guide, without the internet guides that are out there today. It's just amazing to think, back then, you would just play through a game. It's a lot different now. Obviously, I have this massive collection of games. Back then, I only had, 1 or 2 games to play. So, you never really got bored with the game. You'd sit down, figure it out. You may take a break, come back to it once you figure it out. But definitely one of my favorite games, especially in the Mario franchise. And then we've got Goldeneye. So a friend of mine had this. I'd go over to his place on the weekends, and we would play this so much. Played single player mode. We would switch back and forth. Some awesome memories of this game. I actually never played the multiplayer mode in this game. I know a lot of people get the game just for the multiplayer mode, but one of my favorite games playing growing up. Love the gameplay of that game. And to go along with that, he also had Pilot Wings 64. Played so much of this as well. We'd play Mario 64, take a break, put Pilot Wings in, play it for a while, take a break, put Goldeneye in. It was such a great time. There were some amazing games that came out for the Nintendo 64. So fast. They didn't have that many launch titles, but then they started ramping out games, and all of their games were of high quality, including this next one. I played this so much over summer break, and it is Wrestlemania 2000. There were so many good wrestling games on the N64. Wrestlemania 2000 I played the most of. No Mercy I played a lot as well, but nothing compares to how much I played Wrestlemania 2000. Walking through the storyline / career mode, just so much over summer break one year. So definitely, it's not necessarily the best game on the N64, but it's the one I played the most of. And that's why it made this list. Next up, we're actually going to jump over to Beavis and Butthead. So I played this I remember playing this the most on Super Nintendo. Never had it for the Sega Genesis. However, I no longer have the Super Nintendo version. Still on the lookout for a copy of it. So this is the Genesis version, but played this so much. This was probably one of the earliest titles I actually remember playing. And I can still picture, the house I grew up in, sitting in front of the TV and playing it on the weekends. It's just it's just that feeling of realizing, yeah, I played this game, and I try to play it now, and I find it so difficult. I still need to sit down and try to play through it. I'd love to get the Super Nintendo version one day and try it out and see how it compares to the Sega Genesis version, because I started to play the Sega Genesis version, and at least for me, it was a struggle trying to figure out, okay, what am I really supposed to be doing? The moves that the characters make don't really make sense to me. How do I avoid enemies, things like that. Next up is Jex for the 3DO. So I remember around the time that Hills was going out of business, Funko-Land was going out of business, they had a open box 3DO that my father picked up for my brother and I, and this was the pack-in title for it. One of my favorite games is Jex for the 3DO. For whatever reason, it's the only system I can play it on. I just think it's because of that's what I remember growing up. Obviously, there is some foul language in this game, but it's it's a blast to play, especially playing through that first level. Not necessarily a speed run, but just there's so many things you can do in the game. You get to the end of the level and realize you didn't achieve the objective. Go back and play it again. Fun game overall. There's been a lot of Jex games released in the series, but my personal favorite has always been the original one on the 3DO. And then next up, we have Power Rangers for the Sega Genesis. So this is the original one, not the movie one. And my neighbor had this growing up, as well as the next title, which is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. So before I actually got a Sega Genesis, my neighbor had one, and I used to go over there after school all the time, and we'd watch Power Rangers cartoon, and then, or the show, and then afterwards we'd play some of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 with Sonic and Tails, and then we would also play the Power Rangers video game. So many fond memories just playing both of these games. And then next up, we have a series of Sega CD games. So I'm going to start off with Sega Classics. So for those familiar with the Sega CD, there were two versions of this, both pack-ins. There was a 5-in-1 and a 4-in-1. This is the 5-in-1. I don't exactly remember which one I had, whether it was a 5-in-1 and 4-in-1. I want to say it was probably the 4-in-1 that was bundled with Sherlock Holmes, but not 100% sure. But the key games I remember playing from this were Streets of Rage and Golden Axe. Two amazing games. Streets of Rage just hooked me. To this day, still one of my favorite side-scrollers. Love playing that game. It's a great beat-em-up. Streets of Rage, obviously Streets of Rage 2 is huge. I love Streets of Rage 2. And that really got me into that beat-em-up genre. And I loved Streets of Rage. Like I said, Streets of Rage 2, to me, is probably a better game. It's more fun. But, you know, just the remembrance of... I played so much of Streets of Rage and Golden Axe on here. And obviously there's other games on here. You've got Revenge of Shinobi, you've got Super Monica GP, you have Columns. Some great games on here. Next up is Ecco the Dolphin for Sega CD. So I know a lot of people don't like this game, but I played so much of this growing up. This is actually one of the few games I actually did play at my house versus, you know, friends having the game. I did personally have this game, and it was such a blast to play. I used to play endlessly, you know, just swimming throughout the ocean, and it wasn't necessarily that, you know, I was trying to finish the game. It was just more around enjoying the experience. You know, I got to, you know, play as a dolphin. You know, I didn't really understand, you know, the meaning behind the game or anything like I do now. Or, you know, how the game came to be, you know, its impact on different areas. But overall, definitely one of the biggest things that I remember from my childhood. And then next up, we have Compton's Interactive Encyclopedia. So there are actually 4 versions of this disc. It's basically a disc for the Sega CD. It's a full encyclopedia. It was made by Compton's around that time where they were making, you know, encyclopedias on CD-ROM for your PC, and they released the copy for the Sega CD. There's actually 4 versions of this. I have 2 versions. I'm still on the hunt for the 2 other versions. Eventually I want to get all of them. What's extremely interesting about this is, you know, these were released in the early to mid 90s. And still to today, nobody has identified all the differences between the 4 versions. And it's very interesting. I used this as research growing up. I lived pretty far from the local library. I could go there after school, but it was then trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I get home because I live so far from the school. This helped out tremendously. You know, today it's a little bit dated, but back then it was a modern encyclopedia that, you know, I could go to it for research for any type of history type projects. And so when I got back into collecting, I really wanted to pick these up, and it actually took me forever to find a copy. Ended up getting a copy from Retro Game Treasure, of all places. I had it on my wish list, and they sent it to me 1 month. A huge shock. I was so happy to get it. And then it was only about a week and a half later, I actually found on eBay another version of the game I was the only person to bid on it. I went ahead and picked it up, got it for under $10. So there's still 2 copies left, or 2 versions, I should say, that I don't have. Really hoping to find those one day, but I am definitely happy to have this game back in my collection. Like I said, that one, of all the games, that one probably had the biggest impact on me as a child, just because it meant so much to me. I used it for research. It was truly that point of, okay, I can do research online from home. This was way before the internet was a thing. And last but not least is my all-time favorite game. If you follow me, you know what it is. It is Shenmue for the Sega Dreamcast. And Shenmue, I remember getting, and it's obviously I have all 4 discs. It was, I got it new. I was actually one of the few people that, really got into this game. I don't remember really seeing the advertisements or anything other than, what was pushed out via the official Dreamcast magazine, which I have the full set of. They had those DVDs with them. One of the months they sent out basically a movie promoting Shenmue. The movie was phenomenal. So when the game came out, I got it. I remember I was on summer break from school, and I literally sat down and I played it non-stop for a week straight, beginning to end. It's just one of those games that I plan on doing a video on this in the future, but it had such an impact on the gaming industry. It was kind of that first open world game, where you go out and try to figure things out on your own, and there's not predefined levels or anything like that. And they really threw a curveball with weather patterns, right? So certain things would happen only if it was raining that day, or only if it was sunny, or if it was the second Tuesday of the month. There were all these different circumstances that you had to be at a specific spot between 9 and 11, or if you didn't make it home in time, you didn't get your allowance for the next day. And then they even threw in all the games in there. They put in sub games so you could play Space Harrier, Outrun. There's all these games that you can play within the game. I don't want to get too much in this video, but I will definitely do another video on Shenmue. One of my favorite games. It's the first multi-disc game I ever remember playing. And, it was crazy. You had a 4-disc game. Really, it's 3 discs of the game, and then the passport disc was the 4th disc. But it was just, you would play it, and then you get immersed in it. You're playing, all of a sudden, you're doing a job, you're driving a forklift, and then you're having fun on the job, you're racing your forklifts, and it's just crazy. It's a real world timed game for the most part. I mean, time is accelerated in the game, but it really, it caused games like GTA 3 and, these open world games to really come into existence. So, not necessarily from the gameplay, but just overall, this had the probably, next to Compton's Interactive Encyclopedia, this had the biggest impact on me. It's probably the last game I remember playing beginning to end. Not just non-stop, but just period finishing a game. This was probably it. I'm going to be getting back into that. I want to start doing some A to Z game reviews for the Sega Genesis, nearing that completion. So I'm definitely going to be completing a lot more games, but this was the last game that I remember playing start to finish. And, that is saying something. I'm actually not a huge fan of Breath of the Wild just because it's so open. I've played it for hours and hours and hours, and I feel like I'm not progressing at all. Sure, theoretically, I'm probably about halfway complete with the game, but you just feel like it's never ending.
Shenmue was never that way. It was open world, but you still had a sense of completion, right? It was open world, but it was open world in zones. So you would work, this near zone, the local streets, and then once you've progressed through that, then you would realize, okay, there's another zone I can go to, and then you would go to that zone, and then you unlock the bus ticket, so then you could take the bus to even a further zone. And then it progressively got bigger and bigger and bigger, which I really liked. It was open world, but yet it kept you constrained within reason, which was awesome. But that's it for this video. I just wanted to share some of my favorite games that I had growing up that had a big impact on me, and just kind of reminisce on these. Again, I plan on doing some other videos in the future, kind of detailing these games more of a review type game, review type video, but Shenmue, definitely probably the all-time greatest game in my opinion. Thanks for watching this video. I definitely wanted to give a shout out to all of my Patreons who support me. For those that don't know, I do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/retromike. If you enjoy the content I put out, definitely consider checking out my Patreon page. I upload all of my videos early to my patrons. There's a bunch of other rewards I do. I do live chat sessions, things like that with my patrons. If you're interested, if you enjoy this channel, definitely consider checking out my Patreon.